Hi, everyone. Welcome back to FileCloud's Q&A session. Today, we are covering automation. I am joined by Jason Dover, Chief Product Officer at FileCloud. How you doing today, Jason?
Pretty good. How's it going today, Katie?
I'm doing all right. So
Great.
let's just jump into it. Why is automation important for file sharing and content collaboration?
That's a really good question, Katie. And we certainly have seen a lot over recent years of focus around automation, right? At kind of a technology level. But when you take a step back, it's really about the business. That's normally the driver for automation. And it's normally the driver that leads to successful automation implementations across the organization. And ultimately it comes down to Office of the CIO, IT have limited sets of resources. There's been a lot of focus on how IT can deliver more for the business. So the question becomes, how can we take things that perhaps are low cognition, that you don't want your high valued people, your smart people constantly working on, so that they're freed up to focus on more strategic work, projects that are going to actually move the business forward, exploration of how you can leverage new technologies to create competitive differentiators, right? So that's the ultimate of why automation is important for organizations. When you now peel the onion back a little bit more, you go to the next level to thinking about file sharing and content collaboration. Well, typically when I'm sharing content, I'm moving files around, there's something else that needs to happen with it next. Either I want someone to review it, I want that to get perhaps processed in some way by a system or a team so that I can now extract new value out of it, right? It's normally part of some sort of workflow. That workflow may be as simple as I'm sending a file to you to review and give me some feedback back, but that's still a workflow. And there may be steps that I need to have done, especially if I have an environment with high degrees of governance requirements, high degrees of compliance requirements. I also need to make sure that you are the right eyes and the right hands, that you should actually have access to the content. And so if I was relying on people to do all of that, that could be very time consuming. And again, back to the top, taking time away from more strategic things that business operators and IT could be focusing on.
That sounds great, and it's a really important value addition to our systems to build in more efficiency. Now, you did talk a little bit about how automation is actually used in a workplace or in an organization, but could you give a few more examples of use cases for automation?
Yeah, for sure. Of course, FileCloud, we are in the file sharing and sync and content collaboration space. Our primary value prop is helping customers to easily collaborate on content both inside and outside of their organization. So a lot of the work that we've done around automation centers on that, right? So moving files to the right place automatically, perhaps making sure that there's approvals in place that needs to happen. So as an example, let's say I have content that's been classified as being sensitive, right? It could have the classic PII, but it also could just be something custom to my ecosystem. Maybe there's information about certain types of customers that only certain folks are authorized to review. Well, if I have someone who shares that or attempts to share that outside of my organization or perhaps outside of my team, I may want to either personally or at least someone authorized in my group, I may want to have them run their eyes across that first and approve it before it happens. Right. So that would be a common workflow that we have, is making sure that there's approvals in place before content gets shared, especially if that's outside the boundaries of your firewall and of your own environment. Another thing that was kind of touched on but is things like classification, right? So I don't want to, again, have someone have to manually go through and say, is there sensitive content? Is there something in here that we need to perhaps give a little bit more care? So within the system itself, we have capabilities that automates classifying it based on rules and metadata that we're able to implement within the environment. And there's also capabilities that can just prevent things from happening that shouldn't happening, right? So through the use of policies, through the use of things like data leak protection and that classification, I can also automate the process that If something does have PII, well, you simply cannot share it outside the bounds of what you should be doing, right? So those are some of the things that extends, of course, to things like budget approvals, file review, perhaps client intake, new employees that's coming on board. There may be files that needs to be transferred, needs to be processed, things that typically are going to require some additional check, making sure that that gets notified to the right person and nothing happens next until that gets approved. That's kind of the core value of some of the things that we're seeing our customers look for.
Okay, that's a lot of power. So how does FileCloud make automation accessible for users?
Yeah, user experience, ease of use, that's something very important to us from a product perspective. And so it was very important when we built many of these capabilities to not require the bar to be very high when it came to coding and development skills, right? There are some automation solutions that do exist, and it requires folks to basically be quasi-developers. Our approach always is things that we expose to our customers. It needs to be low code, no code. And we've approached that the same way with this set of capabilities across all of the things that we mentioned, specifically the automation functions that are enabled for end users, assuming that an administrator makes that available in the environment. Well, it's a drag and drop builder, right? So the customer, the user can very easily get into accomplishing what they want with human readable feedback, and it makes it very, very easy for them to leverage this. And same thing with the other things that we mentioned around classification, DLP. Obviously, the administrator is going to interact with those capabilities, so there's a bit more technical aptitude required, but it's still very simple and very easy and accessible.
That sounds perfect. Speaking as somebody with relatively little technical aptitude, I appreciate the no code option. So then, where can an end user find these magical workflows with the drag and drop?
Well, for the automation functions that we mentioned for end users of FileCloud, they see that right on their left-hand nav. So as they're navigating around the user interface, going into different files and folders, they're able to just click on workflows that launches that drag and drop builder, as I mentioned, and they're able to interact with it. For the automation functions on the administrator side, very similarly, from the administrator user interface, they have a number of jump points right in their navigation for when they want to engage with the automation functions.
That sounds brilliant. It's easy to use and easy to find. It's everything I'm looking for. So thinking about our administrators who have access to more of these perhaps advanced tools, how can they leverage these tools in FileCloud to protect content?
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit earlier, and hopefully that's coming across in this talk that automation is kind of a capability that's streamed through different parts of the system, right? You have capabilities that's enabled for the end users directly. You have some capabilities that's enabled for administrators to get their tasks done. Specifically from a protection perspective, it comes back to some of those things that we mentioned earlier. So automatically, as an example, having content that comes into the system gets scanned by a third-party antivirus, right? That would be one of those automation functions that an administrator can enable in the ecosystem. Content classification, as we mentioned, to make sure that sensitive content, PII content, CUI content is actually classified and that policies are now applied to that to make sure that it gets handled properly. Data leak prevention capabilities, where I automatically check the content when an end user is trying to take some action to see, is this allowed or not, and automatically blocking things that shouldn't happen. I think this is actually a great topic for us to dive into for its own segment, but these are some of the things that administrators can do to leverage automation within FileCloud to help protect the content of their companies.
That sounds really exciting. And certainly as an end user of FileCloud, it's nice to know that I have automation functionalities, but I also have guardrails. So the admins are still looking out for us, and our data will still be secure while my end goals, my file sharing and content collaboration needs are still answered and enabled with FileCloud, which is really great. So thank you so much for coming on to talk about automation. Really looking forward to learning more about some of these admin functionalities that you've mentioned.
Always great to chat with you, Katie, and look forward to next time.
All right. Talk to you then.
All right.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.